The Prelude to the second Bach cello suite is, I think it's probably the most, or at least one of the two most dramatic and almost romantically expressive works in all of the 6 Bach suites. That and the Sarabande from the 5th suite. Bach, of course, everybody has many different approaches to it. So tonight I'd like to look at what I think are the key elements of trying to decide how to approach Bach and questions we have to ask and answer. First of all, in Bach especially, you have to analyze, is there melody? Is there, obviously there's usually almost always harmony, I guess, and analyze the rhythm and find out which of those Bach is using as his main point at that time, or how they combine together, where the melody is the emphasis, where the harmony is the emphasis, where the rhythm is the emphasis, and we're going to analyze all 3 of those. In the Prelude of the 1st suite, which is a little more common that everybody knows, this is actually plays itself out very clearly. There's no discernible melody in the opening. How would you say, what's the melody of that? Not really. I think Bach was a little better composer than that. Rhythmically, what do you have there? You have straight 16th notes, so there's no emphasis being created by different lengths of notes. He's simply using the harmony of 1, 4, 5, 7, 1, the most basic cadence that we have, chord progression in all of music. That's what he's starting with, that's his emphasis. Therefore, when we approach the piece, that's what we need to focus on and bring out in the best way possible. In the 2nd suite, somewhat similar, you have no really identifiable melody as such. The harmonic progression is somewhat similar to the 1st suite. It's an obvious 4-bar phrase, just like the 1st suite. But what's interesting here is how he puts the emphasis on the rhythm. And in Baroque music, most movements, not the Prelude is not a dance movement, but all the other movements of the suites are dance movements. And usually the emphasis is on the 1st beat. The courant's a good example, almost always in the 1st beat. The minuets and the bourrées, the emphasis is on the 1st beat, and then it recedes and then comes back to the 1st beat constantly. A jig, very much a 1st beat, downbeat oriented piece. Sarabande, however, is almost always a 2nd beat emphasis within the 3 beats of the bar. I want to talk about the 5 basic ways that we have as an instrumentalist in creating emphasis, in creating the audience's attention to a particular note. As modern, more romantic players, we have the accent of the sforzando. We also create emphasis with bow speed. By simply moving more energy through a particular note, your ear is drawn towards that note. We also have the use of weight. Putting a little bit of weight on a note compared to others around it will create an emphasis on that note. Certainly vibrato can create an emphasis on a particular note, or the use of, or the non-use of vibrato can create an emphasis in the opposite direction of the use of the vibrato. The 5th one that is commonly used in our instrumental creation of emphasis and stress is the agogic accent, which is the emphasis on time. If you're playing a passage of steady notes, where's the emphasis? Maybe put a little vibrato with it, a little bow speed, a little weight that we're trying to use, and then maybe even a heavy accent. You're using all 5 stress methods to create that emphasis. Most of these instrumental methods are used in combination. They're rarely isolated as just a forzando or just a bow speed or just a vibrato. They work together. Compositionally, composers, and in this case particularly Bach, uses four major methods, compositional methods of creating stress. One is rhythmic stress. Two is the direction or the ebb and flow of the line. Where is it going to? Where is it coming away from? Harmonic stress, such as we've talked before about of doing trills from the note above. Why? Because it creates stress. It creates a dissonance, which is a harmonic element that the composer uses, especially in Baroque music, but all through music, to create that emphasis and stress. And fourth is intervallic, and you're going to see this quite a bit. We'll talk about it in depth. When a composer's going along, when they drop a large interval, either way up or way down, they're creating stress by, or emphasis or expression by using that method. The second suite, I want to look at this rhythmic element that is really creating and bringing forth the architecture of the music. Look on the first bar, the second bar, the third bar, the fifth bar, the seventh bar, the ninth bar, 13th bar, etc. Look at them one at a time. Look at the first bar. What's the longest rhythmic value there? Which beat? How about the second bar? Which beat? How about the third bar? Which beat? Fifth bar, seventh bar, ninth bar, 13th bar, 15th bar, the 18th bar, so forth, 19th and 20th bars. What is he doing here? He's putting the emphasis, the rhythmic emphasis, the longest note on the second beat. This is a little unusual. Usually the preludes are all normally first beat oriented, but here he's putting his emphasis on the second beat. He stops after that 20th bar or whatever and doesn't really use it much again until 2 bars towards the end of the piece. What is it, bar 40 and 42. But that emphasis we'll find is probably the key element in this whole suite, in this whole movement of the second suite. What about direction of the line? Let's look, is the emphasis on the first beat, or where is the flow and the ebb of the music going? Let me demonstrate the first couple bars here. The music's going there, or is it? Or is it? B flat, it's a real stress note. The music is going, it flows to that second beat and then comes away, and it flows again to the second beat each time. So that's the direction of the line. You'll see that in each of these same bars where he's put the rhythmic emphasis on the second beat. You'll see that the music really flows to that second beat and then comes away. Now, harmonic motion, think about it for just a moment. What is the single strongest interval in all of music? When we play in the orchestra, what do we always get? Half steps, okay, it's okay. Whole steps, minor third, major third, perfect fourth. Which one's stronger? Perfect fifth going up to tonic, or perfect fifth going down to tonic? The descending perfect fifth is, I think without argument, the single strongest interval in all of music. Baroque composers use it all the time. Classical composers, every cadence, almost every cadence comes out 5-1. And who gets that? We almost always get it. So obviously, we are the most important instrument. Let's look at bar 26 now and see how this plays out. We have to decide in bar 26 how to bow it, how to finger it, all these types of things. But before we can do that, we have to figure out what in the heck is going on in the music. And let me play it a little bit, I'll make it obvious. Where's the emphasis. He puts it in the bass note. It's not the upper moving notes, but each time he writes a scale. Straight scale. So within this scale, logically perhaps we might think that each of those notes within the scale should get the same emphasis. Let's look per bar. The first bar there at 26, you have on beats 2 and 3, G and A. Then you have the next bar, beats 2 and 3, B flat, C sharp. Next bar, D, E. Next bar, F, G. So if I played it, or I could play it. They could be even, or one other possibility. Does the A, the second note, the bass note, belong to the first note? In other words, G and A, do they belong together? Or G starts the line and then he goes A picking up half step to B flat, C sharp picking up to D, E picking up to F. It's very much a leading tone in each of these cases. And in my opinion, that's actually what's going on. With the second beat emphasis, we see, oh, well then the first note of the scale should be stronger, the second note less, the next one more because it's second beat, less, more, less, more, less. That's one way to look at it. The other is the harmonic motion. What's going on here? Listen. What interval? 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. So we've already established in the piece that the emphasis is on the second beat. Here he's putting a 5-1 on the second beat, plus he's running the scale. So there's all sorts of reasons here to emphasize the second beat, the G, the B flat, the D, which of course brings out the G minor quality to the passage. Now let me try it and see what happens. That's with the emphasis on 2 and 3. I hit 3 a little bit so that it leads to there, as in a pickup note. And finally, the fourth method of this creating stress and emphasis is the intervallic method, the use of large intervals to create the emphasis. When Bach uses this, he's almost always going from a higher note to a lower note. He doesn't usually go bom, ba-da-da-da, but he usually going ba-da-dee-dee, bom, be-dee-da, and drops to the bass note. Bass notes, of course, are important in Baroque music. That's long been established. And Bach is playing on that ideal. Let's look at bar 14. And you see right away in bar 14, there's a very large jump from the C of the first beat down to the D starting the second beat. Okay, what if Bach didn't make that large leap? What if he wrote the same notes, just put the D up an octave? How would that sound? There's not much emphasis on the D. It just sounds like this. But instead, he goes like this, boom, and back, telling us to take, first of all, a little bit of time, so we have an agogic accent. It's also a bass note. We want to bring it out with a stronger sound. And look, 2 bars later, in bar 16, he does exactly the same thing to bring out that large interval. Other examples, said bar 16, and also in 20 and 21. Here in 20, it's the end of this sequence he's been building up. He drops down there, right there. Now, these other intervals, he's dropping a little bit here and there, but he does this one in particular to create the beginning of this new section. He's just reached the height of the phrase, and now he's going to start a sequence that goes for 3 full bars after that. Okay, I'd like to talk now a little bit about important notes. We saw that in the example at 26. We had to identify that moving line, and bring it out. Let's look at a very difficult challenges in bar 21 through 24. What's important here? How do we decide which of these downbeat notes? As you can see, Bach wrote it this way with separate bows. So forth like that. So it's fairly obvious this is a very downbeat. Every beat has a little bit of an emphasis. But look at this phrase. It goes for 3 bars. Is there any one note that is more important than all the rest? First one, obviously, take a little time. That's second beat. Maybe we should take time on the second beat. There, the second beat doesn't seem to have the same influence in the music as he's just going through this progression. And there's no real progression of the, there's no logical direction of these notes. You got E, A, D, C, C sharp, D, G sharp, B, G sharp, A. Which one of these notes? Is there one note that is more important than the others? I'm going to play it for you with my choice. Which note did I choose? It's the G sharp. Why did I choose the G sharp? It leads to where the music is going. So Bach throws it in there because he's trying to help tell us. It's been meandering around, it's been wandering. All of a sudden he gives us this G sharp, which if you keep that G sharp in your ear, and that's what Bach would do on the organ. He would take one of the pedal notes with his left foot and play that note sustained while he goes on and then resolves it a bar later, 2 bars later. In this case, it's 3 full beats later, which is really quite a long time. Most composers would end it more quickly, but Bach really makes the listener work. Here's this leading tone note, this really important note, which is telling us where the music is going, and then we have to recognize when we reach the destination. Let's look at this same concept now in bar 30. We've had a sequence coming up to this bar. Okay, what's going on there? Is there anything of particular importance? Let's look at the second beat, first of all. You have to create the importance of that C sharp in the listener's ear so they hear this dissonance, this suspension, this leading, and where is it leading us to? A smaller example of that happens in the next 2 bars. 32 starts with a G sharp. G sharp is leading somewhere. Where is it going to? Logically, to A. Now I want to talk about what I think is one of actually the most difficult passage to discern. At first it may not seem that difficult to figure out, but let's take a look starting in bar 44 and just look at it now. Let's start with what we know already. Second beat emphasis. What do we have in the second beat of each bar? A. That doesn't sound maybe like it's quite so interesting. What else is going on? Let's look logically at the first beat. If it isn't, in this case, second beat, most logically it would be on the first beat, rarely the third beat. What do you have? First beat is G, next bar F, next bar E, next bar D, next bar C sharp. We have something going on here. This is a pretty clear line. Often, this is what we're looking for in Bach, is this moving line. Where are these important notes? So let me play this. see. I'll play a bowing that helps bring out this first note of each bar. So I'll play the first note with a separate bow. It gives it an agogic accent as well as a bowing accent, and see how that leads us down the line. Okay, pretty clear. In my mind, it seems almost too simple. It's so obvious. It's like we look in the rest of this piece and there's so many layers of discovery and uncovering, and then all of a sudden he gives it to us very simply. Maybe he was in a hurry to go home for dinner, who knows. I'm a real advocate in this piece of sticking with the second beat. And the reason for that is what he's done here, I think, is given us one note again that really determines the whole passage. It's not this obvious scale line, but that has to be brought out. You can't ignore it. But I think there's something more there. Look at that passage again. I'll play it again. I'll do all separate bows. And just listen there's one note in there that I think is way out of the whole system that he throws in as a shocker, as a surprise. Let's see if we can find it. Have you heard it yet? That F natural is so far out in another world that usually when we play it, we just sort of overlook it. But guess what beat it's on? Right before the end of the whole sequence. So let me play it now with a second beat emphasis, and you'll hear how it, in this case, I think it really grows to that note. Again, is there any right or wrong? No. But as long as you recognize what's there and say, and have a way of bringing it out, of stressing it in a way that's appropriate within the style, using these compositional ways, also our instrumental ways, it will help us solve or do our duty, which is to make music clear to the listener. Now I'd like to talk about a very controversial subject, which is bowings in Bach. Or in my opinion, we shouldn't really call them bowings, because in the Baroque period they didn't have a concept of bowings like we do today. You don't see any down bows, you don't see any up bows. All you see every so often are a lot of little slur marks. Sometimes you see some very long slur marks. But I don't think they had the concept of bowing there. In fact, I know they didn't have the concept of bowing that we do today, because they had a totally different bow, totally different time, a totally different mindset than we have. But I think there's three things that we can do about the bowings that I want all of you to think about when you're looking at the bowings. We can do, one is just exactly what's written on the page. I gave you a copy of the manuscript. You can just take that as gospel, as a lot of people do, and play it exactly as it is. Or you can think about the character and the spirit of the music and try to explore a bowing that will help bring off that character and spirit of the music. Obviously, it has to be within the style, within the intent of the music, but what is that intent? What is the character? What's the spirit? Is it lively? Is it legato? Is it flowing? Is it more agitated? These are all things that we can enhance by the bowing that we use. And then third, of course, would be to learn some of the, to work with a Baroque bow, to work on a Baroque instrument and see how it responds. They held the bow here. When the bow is held here, this separate brush stroke works really very, very easily. In fact, it's the main stroke of this type of Baroque hold. And so that has to influence how we play those notes, regardless if we're playing on a modern instrument or an early instrument. The question remains, though, are these really bowings or are they slur markings? And how do we understand them? I think part of the problem certainly for me, is that the manuscripts here are filled with inconsistencies and random bowings that have one bar has nothing to do with the next bar, one beat has nothing to do with the next beat, even though they're exactly the same music. At the end of 28, he changes the bowing after we've been doing this the whole way from, let's back up all the way to 26 in this sequence here. Those four notes, he leaves off the slur. Everything else keeps going with the sequence. So you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, these four notes, he's divined that these four notes are different than all the others, when in fact it's just still part of the same sequence. There is no more importance in the musical line there. It's probably that whoever was writing it out, copying or whatever, which was his wife, just missed one. Have you ever copied music? Yeah, you miss things once in a while. There's no rhyme or reason for it being there. Let's look at bar 35. You've got the 33 through 35. You've got the same thing. The very first beat is all separate bars. Next bar is slurred, and yet it's exactly the same music, especially within a sequence. It's very unusual. We wouldn't do that today. If we have the sequence going one bar to the next, we would use the same bowing throughout that. Another discrepancies in bar 37. You see the first beat is slurred. Next bar, it's exact same figure. The slur is left off for no apparent reason. Now let's look at bars 16 and 14. Bars 14 and 16. I'm going to play it for you the way Bach has, how it's written in the manuscript here. And listen to the emphasis that the bowing creates in the music. He has a separate bow on each of the first beats, which puts, especially with a modern bow, it puts a lot of emphasis not just on the first beat, but on the second beat and the third beat. Are all three of those beats equal? It doesn't make sense to, at least my modern thinking, to do the same bowing but try to create different effect. I would use a different bowing to create the emphasis that Bach is trying to create, which we talked about this spot before. Bar 14, the emphasis is that big intervallic leap. Now, within that first bar, all you really heard was that large leap down to the second beat. So instead of creating a, you now just hear as the main emphasis in that bar. The same thing is apparent in bar 21. He has all separates and then the 1 and 3 slurred. So he breaks up the end of the sequence with all separates, but also doing. If you decide in the music that that's what you want to do, bring out each one of these notes exactly the same, then that's not a bad bowing. Just be careful with a modern bow. It's very easy to hit those notes too strong. Finally, I think it's really important that you study the music from the manuscript of any score that you can. In this particular movement, there are actually, in the manuscript, there's 2 wrong notes. Now, I thought Bach was, this is the hand of God writing here. How could it possibly be a mistake? But look in bar 19. I'll play the bar before. All of a sudden he throws in C major there, when in fact the harmony is A minor. Simply made a mistake. Instead of writing she wrote, it's just a mistake. Let me play it with the right note. Then you can hear the very natural, the very Bach-esque chord progression. He does this also, unfortunately, in bar 60 at the end. Now everybody's figured out what the right note is supposed to be, but look at bar 60. Doesn't quite sound right, does it? So what should that note be in 60? It's 1-6-4 chord. That is, again, one of the most standard cadences in all of Baroque music. Bach uses it all the time. So it's very, very logical that that's supposed to be an F, that middle note, and then therefore it's a D minor quality. But if we're totally a disciple of the manuscript, then we would play it in a way that is simply wrong. So there are many different ways to approach music, Bach. Again, not necessarily a right or wrong way, but there is a best way that you need to find based on who you are, the instrument you're playing, the modern, the Baroque, your analysis of the music, and the emotion and the spirit of the music. So, thank you.